All right, today we've got another Dynasty redraft. Today we are going to be going with the 2022 NBA draft and redrafting it from a Dynasty perspective, as if we were just going in to a rookie draft today. So obviously, this is going to be a little bit different from just a typical redraft of, where they would go or like what teams would pick them, because it doesn't usually line up perfectly with that order anyway when we're doing our Dynasty draft. So this is going to be based on what we know today, where we would take these players if we had the opportunity to redraft right now. And we don't have ADP data, or I don't have ADP data from that year. So maybe that would be a good thing to be able to compare this against, but we're just going to compare it against the original draft spot. Really, this is less about, oh, wow, you would have gotten really, really good value based on ADP if you went with this player or whatever. It's just a new way to divide up the players, and so we can rank them against each other and see who we value more. I find exercises like this interesting because sometimes if we're trying to rank the whole league and going 450 players deep or 300 or whatever you do for your rankings, it's a little bit harder to get everything specific. But if we're just going from a specific class or specific position group or specific team, it makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of digest everything. So it's like I might have certain players ranked at a certain spot just in general, but then when I divide it up by a smaller group, I look at them, I'm like, oh wait, maybe I am a little bit lower on this player, or a little higher on this player than I should be, because pitting them against someone else in their class is a little different. So we'll see. After going through this class, I think we had 26 from the 2021 class who are in the top 300. We have 27 players from this class in the top 300, including the 300th player. So just barely getting the edge there. But I think a little bit of a difference, and it's only slight. We have 10 players in the top 100 for this one. We had 11 players in the top 100 for the 2021 class. We also had 6 players in the top 25 for the 2021 class. We have 2 players in the top 25 for this one. So looking through it, though, there are 22 players in the top 200, and we had 19 players in the top 200 in the 2021 class. So part of that could be that we're still a little bit up in the air on some of these guys, since they will be entering their 4th year in the league. Yes, entering their 4th year in the league now. So still a little early, but we're able to get a good idea of what a lot of these players are like. Some of them have started to get new contracts, which helps. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and get into this. Yeah, cool. So we'll start at the top, and this is going to line up with my unpublished Dynasty rankings that will probably be out at some point. Not sure when, maybe some sort of preseason content. So it'll be even more updated than it is currently, but that's just the way it's going to be. So the first player, which is a guy I have ranked 9th in my Dynasty rankings and went 2nd in the original draft, is Chet Holmgren. And if we check out our partners at FanDuel and we look at their betting odds, we're able to see that Chet Holmgren is currently the 2nd favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. Had a strong case last year, didn't end up winning the award. Evan Mobley won it. Victor Wembanyama is the odds-on favorite and is a pretty likely candidate to win this. But Chet Holmgren has the 2nd best odds, which tells us maybe that we aren't expecting him to win the award at this point, but that if it's not Wemby, Chet's going to have a very strong case, and 2 generational defenders going in back-to-back classes. And really, if we look at it, the top 4 players in Defensive Player of the Year came from 2021, 2022, and 2023 drafts, which is pretty crazy to see that level of defensive talent coming multiple drafts in a row. And I believe all of them went top 5, I think top 4, because Amen went 4th. It's pretty interesting to see this type of defensive talent come into the league recently. Very exciting times for defense, despite what people may tell you. All right, so Chet Holmgren is the first player here that I have, and I have him ranked 9th, as I said, coming off only playing 32 games last year, averaged 15 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 2.2 blocks, 1.4 threes. That was his second season playing, third season since he's been drafted, because he missed his whole rookie year, played 82 games in year 2, and then only played 32 games this past year after injuring his hip in kind of a freak accident, and missed about 3 months, and then still was managed slightly as far as his minutes and his games played. Because OKC has such a big lead in the standings, the main priority was getting him healthy and ready to contribute in the playoffs, as opposed to making sure that he was able to contribute in the regular season, because they were doing fine. But let's not make a mistake here. This is one of the most impactful defenders in the league and a versatile offensive player that still has a lot of untapped potential. He's only 23 years old. A decent passer, pretty good with the ball in his hands for a 7-footer, can space the floor. The shot blocking is really the most, I guess, interesting or attractive fantasy stat here. But he also, this past year, obviously didn't play as many minutes, but the shooting percentages were down as well. Hopefully a full off season, which he did have last year, and then hopefully no early injury that requires him to spend a good bit of the year rehabbing. Hopefully that helps him get back to 100%, and we're able to see those percentages increase. He was still a top 50 player in 9-cat scoring last year, but was top 20 during his first year of playing. So that level of category league production is off the charts. Not quite as dominant in points leagues, but still a very, very solid piece. I think this would look slightly different if I was judging it just based off points leagues, because we would have Chet a little lower, and there's a player that we'll talk about here in a minute that we would have a little bit higher. But going number 2 in the draft and then being first in a redraft, that makes sense. But here's where we're going to start finding some value, and that is getting Jalen Williams, who I have second in this, and I have 11th in my Dynasty rankings. Originally went 12th in this draft. Now he's coming off a phenomenal season where he averaged 21.6 points, 5.3 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 1.6 steals, 1.8 3-pointers. The shooting percentages for him were also slightly down. Could be an increase in usage, could just be a slightly down shooting there. He wasn't super consistent. There was definitely some slower stretches from him, but we got to see him produce at a really high level, the best of his career. But he's been a solid fantasy piece in each of his first 3 years in the league. He's 24 years old, so definitely still some untapped potential, coming off winning a championship. Lots to like here from Jalen Williams. He's pretty locked in, along with SGA and Chet as the pieces of the future here in OKC. You feel pretty safe taking Jalen Williams. There should be more upside here that he hasn't reached, but the floor here is very safe as well. So that's why he's going second in a redraft of the 2022 NBA draft from a fantasy perspective. And there's definitely a case for him to go 1, 2, or 3. I probably wouldn't take him 1, but I think there's a strong case. I probably would lean more towards 3 in a just a normal redraft of this class. But the number 3 player here is a guy I have 26th in my Dynasty rankings that would be much higher in points specific, like points leagues. And that's because he does have some weaknesses in category leagues. That's Paolo Banchero. Went number 1 in this draft. I think if I were just redrafting and I was looking to build my franchise around a player, I think Paolo fits that better than anyone else in this class. And there are different perspectives on this and how much you should value a guy like Paolo Banchero versus Jalen Williams, with Banchero having a role where he is a high usage player versus Jalen Williams, who we've seen be successful with the ball in his hands. We've seen him be successful as the number 2 scoring option behind SGA. it's, I think, about team building or about team philosophy that could have you go either way. And then Chet obviously has a case as well as probably the best defender in this class. I'd lead if I was just needing my franchise player. I think Banchero fits that. Coming off averaging 25.9 points, 7.5 rebounds, 4.8 assists, and 1.9 threes per game. Those things play really well in points leagues. They also help in category leagues, but the weaknesses in the category leagues are less than a steal and less than a block per game, 45.2% from the floor, 72.7% from the line, and 3 turnovers per game, which I'm not too concerned about the turnovers. That's what a high usage player should have, 3 turnovers per game. I mean, if it's less, then it's great. They're doing a great job. If it's more than that, then like that's kind of what we expect. I think it's when we get into the 4 turnover per game range where it's kind of like more of an issue as opposed to like an expectation. But yeah, I think that he is a player that's incredibly talented. So much untapped potential here. Will be 23 early at the start of next season, but he's only 22 right now. A lot to like based on the first 3 years in the league from him. But for it to be maximized for fantasy, and that's why he's 3rd in the Dynasty redraft, but I would probably take 1st in just a normal redraft, is the style of play is not great for fantasy basketball. One, not too many defensive stats, which really limits you in a category league. You have to build a team a certain way. But it's the subpar free throw percentage, but he still gets to the line a lot. It's not like he's shooting 2 or 3 per game and shooting 72, 73%. He shot almost 8.5 per game last year. So it really can impact your team's free throw percentage, but then also the field goal percentage. Now he's 6'10", 250. In theory, his field goal percentage should be much higher than this. And I think that if he not changes his style of play, but changes his style of play, I guess maybe that is the best way to say it, where he does spend more time or improves his finishing at the rim and finishes at the rim at a higher percentage and also takes more of his shots in that range or takes more threes. And I know like more of like a less analytical, that's almost sounds like it's trying to be negative, but maybe someone that's not as into advanced stats as far as maximizing your shots, that someone that's pro mid-range shot, that might be a good way to say it, would be not wanting Paolo to change what he does and change the way he plays his game. And I think the threat of the mid-range shot is excellent. I think it's something that's important to his game, and I don't think you should stop shooting them. I just think that maybe less of them, but also just improving as a shooter in general, improving as a finisher. But I think those, like the finishing at the rim will be fine. He is 6'10", 250, and I don't think it's bad now that I'm thinking about it. I'll pull up those rim stats while I'm talking about this, but it's let's see, he was 32% from 3 last year, which isn't great, but it's not ideal. Or that's kind of the same thing. I can't do two things at once apparently. I needed to pull this up earlier. Let me do that. Okay, so Banchero shot 66.1% in the restricted area last season, and this is, yes, regular season stats. 41.3% in the paint, not restricted area, so those like short mid-range shots, which isn't great. 41.7% on mid-range shots, which isn't great. Corner threes were both sub 30%, but he only shot like literally just a handful of those. A lot of above the break threes, which is where he was 33.2%. So the mid-range shot, and we can go even more specific. So 5 to 9 feet, he was 42.5%. 10 to 14 feet, he was 44.9%. 15 to 19 feet, 38.4%. 20 to 24 feet, 34.3%. So like, it's not as good of a shot as his shooting at the rim. Would love to see Paolo spend more time getting to the rim because he does shoot a pretty high percentage from there, and I think that would help his field goal percentage. I think that would help the team. But the threat of the mid-range shot is important, I think. Game on the line, getting to a go-to mid-range shot, I think is a great shot. I think keeping the defense honest and hitting that is important. But I think also maybe more threes, more shots at the rim. And I'm not trying to just be like, 2016 Houston Rockets style basketball where it's just threes and layups. I think having mid-range shots is important. But from a fantasy perspective, and honestly just a team efficiency perspective, fewer mid-range shots. The threat of it is great, but we don't want to see him living there because that isn't conducive to winning in the modern NBA. All right, so the next player that we'll talk about here, we've only gotten through 3, so we're going to keep this pace going. Oh, can't keep the pace going. Sorry, guys. It's Dyson Daniels next, so we're not going to be flying through this. Dyson Daniels is the number 4 player on this list. I have him 34th in my Dynasty rankings, and he originally went 8th overall in this draft to New Orleans. Sat the bench for a couple of years, was traded to Atlanta in the DeJounte Murray deal, and I think a lot of Dynasty managers were waiting on the breakout because a lot of us really liked Dyson Daniels as a talent. And I think in limited minutes, he showed flashes of why we liked him so much. He goes to Atlanta, and I talked, and I wasn't the only one. There were so many different fantasy analysts that were saying, hey, Dyson Daniels is a late round flyer. It's great. And I remember talking with Kingy about it pretty early on in doing some mock drafts. And I think he took Dyson around like pick 100 or something. I was like, goodness, if you're doing this in, I don't know if it was July or August, and like by the time we're trying to do these actual drafts, he's going to have to take him so much earlier. But I don't think that ended up happening. He was pretty much a late round flyer in redraft leagues last year, and he finished 14th on Basketball Monster with averages of 14.1 points, 5.9 rebounds, 4.4 assists, 3 steals, 1.1 threes, 49.3% from the line. All of those were career highs by a lot. So were the minutes at 33.8. Also played 76 games, which is a career high. The free throw percentage is abysmal, but he never shoots free throws. And the turnovers are a career high, but with the highest usage of his career and most minutes, that makes sense. But yes, Dyson Daniels is incredible, but we have to temper our expectations because when we look at the 9-cat numbers, it's inflated. And it's hard because I really like Dyson Daniels, but also at the same time, we have to be honest about his value. He can, at times, not single-handedly technically, but like give you enough of an edge to win steals. Like you don't have to get a ton of strong steals options if you have Dyson Daniels. You need a couple average ones, but I mean, if he's averaging 3 per game, he plays 3 games per week. That's, probably about 9. I mean, it's 9 steals based on that direct math, but like obviously it fluctuates a good bit. Sometimes he was getting 6 steals pretty consistently, and then other times it was less. Not too many games with 0 steals. But I think there was 1, 2, 3 games last year with 0 steals. Anyways, a lot of steals, but the rebounds are pretty good. The assists are pretty good. The scoring was fine. Field goal percentage was fine. But Jalen Johnson's back. He was out for a good bit of last year, which increased Dyson Daniels' usage. So I'm expecting the points to go down slightly. Maybe the threes stay around the same. Maybe the rebounds go down slightly because Jalen Johnson's out there, not George Niang. The assists probably go down because Jalen Johnson is going to be the number 2 ball handler behind Trae Young. Dyson Daniels is just going to be a tertiary option. I don't think the steals could go down just because 3 is absurd and hard to achieve. He could still lead the league at like 2.3. I could definitely see that. But assuming he's going to replicate 3 steals per game is unrealistic. He is phenomenal. but we have to temper our expectations. He's probably going to get overdrafted in redraft leagues, and he's probably going to be overvalued in dynasty leagues. I know that I overvalue, like, I don't want to say overvalue. I don't overvalue him. I have him valued higher than most other dynasty analysts, excuse me. Not too many are going to have him up at 34. But I am a believer in his talent. I just think that this upcoming season, we could see some regression from some of the things that he did really well last year. But I think he's also young enough and will improve enough in the areas that are weaknesses for him. Like I think that he can improve as a shooter. I don't think he'll be a great shooter, but that there's still room for him to improve in that regard. And maybe he does improve as a ball handler and the usage doesn't drop too much because he's good enough with the ball in his hands that you still want that to happen, even with Trae Young and even with Jalen Johnson. And then, of course, this is when you think about hypotheticals or, just random scenarios, there is a chance that Trae Young isn't here long term. The Hawks haven't really, like, the reports are that they haven't even really given him an offer on a new contract, and that's something they're probably going to figure out next summer. Maybe, like, things look good for the Hawks this year. Maybe things don't go well. Maybe someone gets hurt. Maybe Trae Young has another subpar season. I mean, he started off slow last year and got better, and obviously still the assists, one of the best passers in the league. But maybe he doesn't play at the level that they want him to, and they're like, yeah, like, we don't want to give you max money. And he thinks he's worth max money. Maybe something doesn't work out with there. And then all of a sudden you have this team that's kind of built around Dyson Daniels, Zachary Reese-Shea, and Jalen Johnson, probably some picks, whatever they get back for Trae Young. Like, I don't know. That's a couple of years down the road, but there is that scenario, I think, as well. So kind of interesting. But now we will try and not fly through this, but go through things a little bit faster because we've talked about 4 players in 22 minutes. The next player on our rankings, we have a couple of bigs coming up here. The next guy we've got is Walker Kessler, who went 22nd in this draft. I now have going 5th in this redraft and went in 48th in my dynasty rankings. An incredible shot blocker, really strong on the glass. It's more here just about what his situation looks like. What does it look like in Utah this year? What is it looking like in Utah beyond this year? A lot of unknown. Walker Kessler should start, but I think the issue with games played or them tanking has limited his statistical output. Could we see him get traded? That's also possible. But right now, I still really, really like his talent. Hopefully he finds a situation where he's able to play. He played 30 minutes per game last year. And I say find a situation, that could be Utah. See him play 30-plus minutes per game, hopefully more games. It's kind of what I'm asking for Kessler, but I think he's too talented to have ranked any lower than this. The next player we have is 6th in our redraft, 53rd in my dynasty rankings, and that is another big in Jalen Duren. Really, really strong on the glass. That was better defensively last year. Is a little bit more dynamic than I think he always gets credit for. Can do a little bit more with the ball in his hands. A pretty good passer for a big, which is why I have him going 6th in this redraft after he went 13th in the original draft. After that, we have Tari Eason, who I have 74th in my dynasty rankings and 7th in this redraft. We talked about this a couple weeks ago with Matt Lawson about how Tari Eason is not going to be directly impacted by Kevin Durant. You can go back and check out that episode for his direct breakdown. I don't remember. Let me see if I can figure out exactly what episode that was now that I'm talking about it so I can reference you to a better breakdown of Tari Eason. Maybe that was, I think it was the Q&A with Matt Lawson. Yeah, Fantasy Mailbag. I believe we talked about Tari Eason in that one. So he'll give you that's a more in-depth breakdown of how Kevin Durant impacts him or really doesn't impact him. But Could still see a big year out of Tari Eason. And obviously the defensive production is what we really, really like here. He's been a really productive player in a limited role. We're just kind of waiting on the breakout to happen, but the talent is definitely here, which is why I have him going 7th after being originally drafted 17th. Next up, going 9th, going 8th is the guy who's 90th in my Dynasty rankings, and that is another big, who is now with the Phoenix Suns, and that is Mark Williams. He'd be higher if it wasn't for his health. There are so many questions about his health, and it's not like he's an injury-prone player. It's like the Lakers reversed a trade because of a failed physical, and he's barely been on the floor his first few years in the league. What's going on here? So if he has a healthy season, I'll bump him up my Dynasty rankings. It's not a question of talent. It is a question of health here for Mark Williams. Next up, we have the number 3 pick from this draft, and that's Jabari Smith Jr. I value, and I don't think this is uncommon, but I value Tari Eason higher than Jabari Smith. If it were, I think starting Tari Eason over Jabari Smith is probably what I would do if I were Ime Udoka, but we'll see what ends up happening. I know it kind of switched back and forth late last year with Amen Thompson locked in as a starter. Should be the same this year. Pretty decent on the glass, a nice floor spacer, a really good defender, but doesn't get too many defensive stats. I think he is a better player than he is in real life than he is in fantasy, and should go higher in a redraft of this class, but isn't going to because it is a Dynasty redraft. And there still is some upside there as well for him to be more productive than he has been. Next player is another more so an upside swing. That is a very talented offensive player that I think I still have some questions about in other aspects of his game, but that's Shaedon Sharpe, who originally went 7th. He's a really talented scorer and a really athletic player, but he hasn't really been able to provide too much else statistically, but I think there's still too much talent and too much upside here for him to be ranked much lower, and he has improved every year. We'll see what his role looks like this year, because things are interesting in Portland now with Jrue Holiday there. Is Scoot Henderson starting? Is Shaedon Sharpe starting? Denny Avdia? Is Jeremy Grant? I mean, I would assume Tumani Kamara is, and I would assume Denny Avdia is. But do they do the right thing and bench Jeremy Grant? Do they start Jrue Holiday, or do they start Scoot and Jrue Holiday and not Shaedon Sharpe? We'll see. But still way too much talent here for me to have him ranked any lower. Next up after Shaedon Sharpe, we have Shaedon Sharpe 10th in this redraft, 100th overall. And he went 7th. We'll go next to the player who originally went 5th in this draft, and that is Jaden Ivey, who I have going 11th in this redraft and went 102 in my Dynasty rankings. I still think he's a really talented player. Definitely some things for him to work on, and maybe he doesn't reach his potential in Detroit, but we'll see. Maybe he gets the opportunity to go elsewhere and really gets to flourish. Maybe we see him, respond this year after Detroit had a really good second half of the year without him there. I still think they were a playoff team if he was healthy, but kind of reminds everyone, this is how good he is. Hopefully that's what happens. I'm rooting for Jaden Ivey, but I have him outside the top 100, but I can't bump him down too much past that because I still believe in the talent, but time is definitely running out here and could definitely see him being bumped down a little bit more at this time next season. After Jaden Ivey, we have going 12th and 105 in my Dynasty rankings. And that is a guy that's pretty much the opposite of Jaden Ivey, in the sense that Jaden Ivey is a very talented player in a situation that I don't think is great for his production, but still I'm betting on the talent. Versus a player that I'm really betting on the situation, who I think is a talented player, but it's mostly about the situation. That's Christian Brown, who has had a really good season last year. And I think that if he was on 29 other teams, I'd still think he's good, but I don't think he would have had the season that he just had. but playing next to Nikola Jokic makes things easier. He shot 58% from the floor. Like, guards don't do that, but he's getting passes from Jokic. So he also fits flawlessly next to Jokic and gets maximized. And that's not to say, I don't think he would stink if he was on 29 other teams, but his talent is maximized next to Jokic. And I don't think either is planning on going anywhere for a while. And there's no reason for the team to want to part ways with either of them. I'm expecting Christian Braun to be a really good fantasy player for a handful of years at least, playing next to Jokic. 13th in our Dynasty redraft is one of the Indiana Pacers, and it's not the one that went first or that they picked earlier on in this draft. It's one they got in the second round, and it's one I'm expecting a big season out of. That is Andrew Nembhard, and I'm not alone in thinking that this is going to be a breakout year for Andrew Nembhard. If we check out our partners at FanDuel, they have Andrew Nembhard as the early favorite to win the Most Improved Player Award. They also have Bennedict Mathurin as the third favorite. They also have Shaedon Sharpe as the fifth favorite, who we also just talked about. So a lot of high expectations for this entire class, this upcoming season. When you talk about, even Orlando being one of the favorites to win the East, I think they're the third best odds, which means they have a pretty good chance to make the finals in a weaker Eastern Conference. Led by Paolo Banchero there. Of course, Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren are on the team that's the favorite to repeat as champions. So a lot of high expectations for this class, but specifically expecting a handful of breakout years with Tyrese Halliburton sidelined from Andrew Nembhard and Bennedict Mathurin. But talking specifically about Nembhard, he has been pretty average in the regular season, a really good defender, but statistically has been pretty average. But when Tyrese Halliburton's off the floor, Nembhard is a high-level producer. We talked about this last week with Matt Lawson. He brought up Andrew Nembhard's, I think it was per possession or per 36 stats. I don't remember which one it was. When Tyrese Halliburton is on the floor, and it's the assists are high level. So expecting a big year from Nembhard with Tyrese Halliburton out. So in a redraft, a redraft league. I know this is a redraft, but the other type of redraft, a 1-year league, Nembhard should go earlier than 108, but that's where I have them in my Dynasty rankings because it's a nice 1-year boost, and maybe it's a little bit better after that, but it's not this long-term change where he's now all of a sudden the starting point guard because Tyrese Halliburton, he'll be back. Next up after that, we have the last member of the top 5 picks from this class. And I think this is one of the examples where doing this exercise makes me feel like I'm too low on a player. But it's Keegan Murray here. And I do think that a good bit of this is not because of how I feel about him as a talent. I think he's a really good player, but there are a couple issues I have. One, he'll be he's 25. He just turned 25 a week ago. A little bit older than some of the other players in this class. I don't love the situation at all. I don't think that, also, I don't necessarily think he's the best fantasy producer. I think he's better in real life than he is in fantasy because he can score, but he's not doing a ton of shot creating. A lot of it is he's a really good floor spacer and solid defender. Averages just under a steal and just under a block per game. So not terrible there, but not really helping you a ton. The field goal percentage is low because a lot of what he shoots is from beyond the arc. Doesn't really create for others because he is a floor spacer. He's fine in the glass. So this is more of like honestly, it's pretty similar to what we get from Jabari Smith in the sense that he's a good floor spacer. He's fine on the glass and he's a good defender, but doesn't really get too many defensive stats. But I also just don't think that Sacramento is the best situation right now for him to get really good looks. I think the difference between this and what Jabari Smith is getting is he has Fred VanVleet. He has Alperen Sengun, who's a high-level passer. He has Amen Thompson and Kevin Durant creating. And in Sacramento, I feel confident in Domantas Sabonis, but not super confident in Dennis Schroeder or even Dennis Schroeder having the ball enough because Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan need it. And they're all fine passers, but I don't think it's going to move Keegan Murray up the pecking order here as far as getting good looks or getting shot attempts. So I think that he's a really good player that if he was in a different situation, and the situation could change quickly in Sacramento. If it does, I'll probably adjust the ranks a little bit, especially if it goes to emphasizing him. And that's maybe something we can project a little bit more, and why I'm saying I feel like maybe I am a touch low on him here after looking at this. Is that the situation changes, things could get really good for Keegan Murray really quickly, but I still don't think he's the best option for category leagues. So we'll see what happens in Sacramento, but as of right now, I'm fine having him go here in a redraft. All right, next player in our redraft is going 15th, and I think we might have to start going rapid fire here for the sake of time and not wanting to make this a super, super long episode. But still, take that away. We're going Jeremy Sohan here, who I think is still a really talented player. Kind of seeing a role change in San Antonio a little bit. Hasn't been super, super productive. And now he's playing behind Harrison Barnes. Average 11.4 points, 6.5 rebounds, 2.4 assists per game last year. Not too many defensive stats, not spacing the floor. I think a lot of it here is still that there is some upside, but I'm less optimistic in a breakout this year from the former top 10 pick. Next up, we've got our first undrafted player, and that is going 16th in our redraft, and I have him 146th in my Dynasty rankings, and that is Kings guard Keon Ellis, who I think that if he was in a different or got the same opportunity that a guy like Dyson Daniels had last year, we could see that similar leap in, hey, this guy's one of the league leaders in steals now, and he can also space the floor better than Dyson Daniels can. I think Keon Ellis could be ready to have, or could have, a massive just statistical breakout season. We've seen it happen in small spurts. I would love to see it happen over the course of a full season. That's not going to happen this year in Sacramento. It could happen by the trade deadline, whether that's Keon Ellis being moved, which I don't think they should do, or someone else being moved to open up minutes for him, which could definitely happen. There was reports that they're actively trying to trade Malik Monk to make minutes for, or make room to sign Russell Westbrook. Yeah, I don't get that one. I hope it's just more of like a speculation type of thing or a false rumor, because I don't get that one at all. Love Keon Ellis. Think he's a phenomenal talent, whether it's in Sacramento or elsewhere. I think he just needs the opportunity. Keeping it going here, the other Indiana Pacer, Bennedict Mathurin, 17th in this redraft, 160 in my Dynasty rankings. I think we'll probably go rapid fire here just to close it out. 18th in this redraft, 162 in my Dynasty rankings. Peyton Watson, who we've just kind of been waiting on to take over for Aaron Gordon, but doesn't seem like it's going to happen. I'm less and less encouraged by that every year. 19, we have Nikola Jovic, 165 in my Dynasty rankings. Could definitely see him having a really nice year for the Heat. 20th in this redraft, I have Vince Williams Jr., who's 175 in my Dynasty rankings. I feel like I'm a little higher on Vince Williams than most others. Really high-level defender, was not healthy for most of last year, but was healthy when nobody else was in the team the year before. So really like what we saw from him that year. Hoping that's something he can do more consistently when the rest of the team is healthy. 21st, we have Max Christie, 177 in my Dynasty rankings. I think he had a nice little stretch there for Dallas after he was traded there in the Luka Anthony Davis trade. Maybe we see that happen in larger spurts. Maybe we don't. But having seen that, I feel optimistic that it can happen. Maybe it's elsewhere, which is why I have him as a top 200 guy. 22nd, 194 in my Dynasty rankings, Jake LaRavia. I think he had some nice stretches in Memphis, some nice stretches in Sacramento, but I think with the Lakers this year, he could have a chance at playing a high-level bench role and being a really productive player. Still young and talented. Excited to see what he can do with this opportunity. 23rd, we have Moussa Diabate, who have 236 in my Dynasty rankings. I think he's a nice talent. I think he's a nice piece to have. I don't think he's a guy that necessarily teams are looking forward to be a starting center, but a really nice rotation piece that has seen some starts, got some starts last year after going 43rd in 2022. It was really effective on the glass. I think he's a really nice piece. Next, Julian Champagny, who's our second undrafted free agent, 24th in this redraft, 268 in my Dynasty rankings. He's always seemed to find his way into minutes in San Antonio, and I think he's been able to be productive at stretches. So can't bump him down too much lower when we know he's going to be a rotation piece, which is more that can be said for some of the other players that are ranked lower. 279 in my Dynasty rankings, 25th in this redraft. We have Carlo Matkovic, still just kind of like an upside swing there after going 52nd in the draft in 2022. 26th, we have Ochai Agbaji, who I have 286. I think he's a fine rotation piece. I think that's probably about it. And if he were more than that, I think we've seen it in him have some productive stretches, but I don't think it happens this year in Toronto if this team is healthy, which, of course, fair to say is a big if. Lastly, 27th in this redraft, which we're just going 27 because I'm just going with players in my top 300. Ousmane Dieng, 300th in my Dynasty rankings, went 11th in this draft. He was a long-term piece, an upside swing, a project, whatever term you like to use, when they drafted him and Thunder drafted him. And time is running out because they just continue to add more and more talented first-round picks. But I still think he's a talented piece, and maybe he ends up elsewhere. But I still think he's been pretty productive when he's gotten the chance. Don't know that it happens for OKC this year because there are so many other really good win-now pieces, and he still might need more time. Maybe it's elsewhere. We'll see how they use him. But that's going to do it for this 2022 Dynasty redraft. Would have been fun to go more in depth with more of these guys, but for the sake of time, we're not going to. But we will keep this series going, try and talk about as much Dynasty as we can over the next couple of weeks. But then also at the same time, might be time to start talking about some redrafts. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, a fun announcement coming up soon. And I think starting to get that figured out to the point where hopefully we can make some sort of announcement within the next week. Pretty excited about it. I think it'll be a new way, not a new way, but like a fun way for a lot of Dynasty content creators and draft content creators to have a new angle to talk about. That's a pretty nice hint for what it is, but still working on figuring this out, finalizing details, and then it'll be announced. But excited for that. Obviously, you can check out, I guess, other Old Man Squad YouTube videos and other preseason fantasy content. I think I'm doing a show with Kingy talking about an auction draft we did. And of course, both him and Dan are continuing to pump out the redraft content. So definitely check that out. It's important for Dynasty managers to check out redraft content. You can give me a follow at NoRuben22. That's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast, part of the Old Man Squad Sports Network, which is part of the Believe Network and brought to you by FanDuel. I will see you guys tomorrow.